Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Jake Asman, who's the host of The Wheelhouse on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 here in Houston, as well as the national host of the Jake Asman Show on SportsMap Radio. Welcome to the show, Jake. How are you doing?
Manav, I'm doing great. I've been such a fan of yours for a long time. We've played some of your interviews on our show because you're always
Yeah,
getting the exclusive access to some of the best athletes in the country. So thanks so much for all you do, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
yeah, of course. It's great to have you on. And let's talk about the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 56 is going to be held tomorrow in SoFi Stadium, featuring the AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals and NFC champion Los Angeles Rams. So, what would you say are kind of like the keys to the game for the Bengals to possibly win this game? Because I think it's fairly certain how the Rams are going to do it. A lot of people are picking the Rams to win this game. You know, play great defense there, and Donald get after Joe Burrow, and Matt Stafford does his thing. But how can the Bengals try and win this game tomorrow?
Yeah, I really think they got to protect Burrow. It's cliche, it's obvious, but this is a Cincinnati Bengals offensive line that has allowed their quarterback to be sacked over 50 times this year. It's amazing they're even in this game in the first place. Most teams can't survive a playoff game where their quarterback gets sacked 9 times, but the Bengals have. They have defied logic throughout this playoff run. They're down 21-3 against the Chiefs in the championship game on the road, and they come back. So I know there's a lot of people picking the Rams, and I get it. They got an amazing defensive line. They certainly have some great playmakers, a really good coach, great quarterback. We all understand what the Rams present. But the Bengals aren't supposed to be here. And when a team is not supposed to be in a certain spot and all of a sudden they keep winning and winning, you start to believe anything's possible. So I think it's going to be a really good game. And I would not be surprised at all if Cincinnati ends up winning it outright.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, the Bengals, they're here in the Super Bowl, and it's really up for their taking. And really, for me, for the key for the Bengals is they just have to really run the ball with Joe Mixon. And that way they can start to use play action to maybe kind of slow down the run. And, you were saying you have to keep Joe Burrow protected. It might be a tall ask for them, but they may have to keep him under 3 sacks at least. That's kind of the goal for me, for them to kind of win this game. And I think really what throughout this playoff run, the story for them has been they've been forcing turnovers on the defensive side of the ball. That's really been a key for them. They had that game-winning interception by Jermaine Pratt against the Raiders, 3 interceptions against Ryan Tannehill. He had 2 interceptions against Mahomes. So they're really going to have to do that again. And I think turnovers and this defense are really going to have to make a play against Stafford.
Totally agree. And you look at these quarterbacks, the guy who's more likely to maybe make that killer mistake might actually be Stafford, just because we've seen him at times this year have a lot of interceptions, including I think he led the NFL in pick sixes this year. So it could come down to a defensive play here or there. I think there's offense in this game. I think it's going to be back and forth. But I do think, a defensive stop could be the difference in this game here. You even go back to the Bengals win over the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, Manav. It was a defensive interception when the Chiefs won the coin toss and were going down the field that put the Bengals in position to end up actually winning that game, despite the fact, as I mentioned, Kansas City won the coin toss. So I think defense will play a role in this one, but I really do expect these two quarterbacks to go back and forth, and I think it's going to be a hell of a game.
Oh, wow. And I think, Joe Burrow, whatever you want to call him, he has so many different nicknames, but it's incredible what he's done this year. And I think he's definitely one of the better quarterbacks in this league right now. Just so calm and collected. Even when he was down 21-3, I mean, he was just ready to go. And I think the Bengals defense has come up big. And I think a big point for Joe Burrow is that he could be, I think, the first quarterback to win a Heisman and national championship and a Super Bowl, especially in his second season. So, I mean, do you think he's playing better than Matthew Stafford in the playoffs? Because Stafford has had 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's looking really confident, definitely slinging that football around. So who do you think is the better quarterback right now?
Yeah, this is tough because both guys have played really well. I think big picture, I rather Burrow, but you could certainly argue in the moment Matthew Stafford's the better player going into this game. But experience is going to be, something that truly matters with this, with this matchup here, right? You wonder how big is the impact of the fact that the Rams were in this game 4 years ago? I know there's some new players on this roster that weren't there, but the core of the team remains the same, including obviously Aaron Donald and what he could do. You add Von Miller, who's already been a Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP. The experience side would favor the LA Rams. And even though Stafford's never played in the Super Bowl, he has a lot of teammates around him that have. So I think you maybe lean Stafford because he's on, I guess you could say, the better team. But Joe Burrow has defied logic this entire playoff run, and it doesn't seem he seems unfazed. He's got that confidence just off the charts, Manav. So I know I'm supposed to have an opinion and give you an answer. I think the answer is I don't know. I think it really just depends who's able to put it all together in the big moments in this game tomorrow.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, amazing as the Bengals run to the Super Bowl has been, I'm just really not sure how in the world they can stop Aaron Donald, Von Miller, Leonard Floyd on that defensive line. And this Super Bowl, really more than anything, is going to come down to the trenches. I think the Bengals offensive line, they did a great job last in the FC Championship against Chris Jones, Melvin Ingram, and Frank Clark. But Aaron Donald, that's kind of like another level that the Bengals are going to be facing. I just don't know how in the world Burrow is going to have enough time to really make those throws. You have offensive line coach Frank Polak. He's going to have to figure out a way for the Bengals to try and guard those guys. I think the Rams just really match up really well against the Bengals, even on the backside. You have Jalen Ramsey guarding Jamar Chase. You have Darius Williams, who can guard T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd. So to me, I think I'm going with the Rams 24-20. I think Matt Stafford will have just enough time to find his guys, Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, Van Jefferson. I think Aaron Donald wins the MVP. So you got a prediction for this game?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Bengals only because I've been so bad at picking games this whole time, Manav, that I'm just going to do the opposite. I agree with everything you said. I think that's an excellent breakdown. Like, if you look at the matchup on paper, the Bengals O-line's not any good. The Rams defensive line's the best in the NFL. They got the best player in the NFL in Donald. They got Von Miller. You're feeling like they're going to win this game. Yet here I am, for whatever reason, going to do the opposite of what my gut is telling me, and I'm going to take the Bengals because why not? They made it this far. They remind me of like the New York Giants runs in 2007 and 2011 where they got the hot quarterback and they got some key players that stepped up at the right times. Kind of Joe Burrow kind of has that quiet confidence of like what Eli Manning was able to do, unfazed by anything. Eli was sacked a ton during some of those playoff wins for the Giants, if you remember. So I just, for whatever reason, I think Cincinnati's going to pull it off. I don't know why. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, Manav, but why not? I'm on the Bengals train for at least this game tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll see, man. You never know with the Bengals. And, I want to hear your thoughts on the Lovie Smith hire that the Texans had this past week. Lovie, who used to be their associate head coach and defensive coordinator, seemingly to me hired and interviewed at the last minute when they could have interviewed him much before, like the other candidates that they had. And to me, I just have a gut feeling this may not be kind of like a long-term deal for Lovie Smith, because to me, I just have a feeling it might lead up to Josh McCown becoming the head coach of the Texans at some point. I think the Texans hesitated to hire McCown this season because, how much of the backlash they would receive, in the public, especially because of the Flores lawsuit and all. And I think the plan for the Texans might be to get him some experience as an assistant head coach and maybe in a couple of years take over from Lovie. And, Lovie's a good guy. He's a good hire. But, some people think that, Lovie might get fired after 1 year like David Culley, but David Culley was really inexperienced. He made a lot of different coaching mistakes and like accepting and declining penalties and stuff of that sort, which is really why I think he got fired. So, you think Lovie is going to be like a bridge candidate?
I hope not. I hope Lovie Smith is the guy that could lead this team, back to the playoffs. And I'm rooting for him to do well. I like Lovie Smith a lot personally. I love his beard as well. It's nice to have, that type of beard back in the great city of Houston here, Manav. But on a serious note, I agree with you. I feel as if they hired Lovie Smith almost in a panic move because once Jonathan Gannon and Nick Caserio reportedly did not agree on coaching staff issues arose, he was out. Then you look at the Flores lawsuit. I don't think they were going to hire him anyway, but certainly with the lawsuit against the NFL, there was no way the Texans were then going to hire him. So that just left Josh McCown as the only finalist. And all of a sudden, they're going to hire Josh McCown in the social climate we're living in after they fired David Culley after 1 year, and they're going to hire this guy with zero coaching experience. It just didn't seem like even the Texans, who at times have not really cared about PR optics of certain things, even the Texans couldn't go down that path. So I'm happy for Lovie, but there's no doubt you have to wonder, is he here longer than 2 years? Like, what are our expectations now for Lovie Smith? And if he's only here for 2 years, Does Nick Caserio now get to hire a third coach after he would have gone through David Culley and Lovie Smith in a 3-year span? So I just wonder, kind of the direction this team's headed. I think the big thing now is, of course, getting the draft picks right, getting the Deshaun Watson trade executed properly, because even if you're a little down on Nick Caserio from some of the things he's done, the one thing you can't question him on is he had a really good first draft without a first or a second round pick. And now the stakes are going to be raised because you're likely going to have another pick in this year's first round because of a Watson trade. In addition to the third pick, you could trade back. You could take the best player available. So they got to get it right. And if they get that aspect of the team right, at least you'll feel a lot better about this foundation that's being laid going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I hope Lovey, sticks around for some time because I think he could be. I think he's been a really good fit down here. And the Texans announced that they're not going to hire a defensive coordinator. I heard. So I think Lovey's going to be calling those defensive plays. I think that that's definitely a plus point because he's going to be calling the plays. It's his defense, and I think the defense this year, they may not have been the most flashiest or had the best stats or whatever, but they played hard. That's one thing that I took away from the season. So do you think it's positive that he's going to be calling plays?
I do. I'm a little surprised that they're not going to name a defensive coordinator, even if Lovey was going to be the play caller. Usually teams have, a DC on the staff. Like Steve Belichick obviously is, kind of serving that role for Bill Belichick with the Pats. So I thought, well, maybe Lovey will just promote Miles, his son, who was the linebackers coach for the team this year. But that hasn't happened yet. So interesting approach thus far. So we'll see. But I am happy with Lovey calling the defense. I think that's a smart move. I mean, the defense played hard for him, as you said, last year. And they were really good at forcing turnovers. Like statistically, they didn't have a great defense yards wise or scoring wise, but they were, in the top 10, I think, in turnovers forced. And that's a staple of what Lovie Smith preaches. So, if you can add some more talent to this defense, I'm excited to see what they could do with another full year in Lovie's system. And then obviously, I think if you look at the other aspect of the coaching staff, keeping Pep Hamilton and promoting him as the offensive coordinator, I think is a great move. I was encouraged by what we saw from Davis Mills down the stretch. And I think having some continuity with the coaching staff, continuity on that side of the ball for Davis is going to be something that really benefits him to give him a legitimate chance to prove he could be this team's long-term answer at QB. So, I don't love the way they got to Lovie Smith. I think the process was bizarre and certainly took a bunch of different twists and turns, but they might have lucked into a unique but solid situation with Lovie Smith leading the way.
Yeah, definitely agree. And, I was looking at your journey. I saw your website actually online. And I know you've been part of NBC's Olympic coverage in Rio as well as Pyeongchang. So, I mean, what's kind of like a moment in this Olympics that has kind of really stood out to you so far?
Yeah, just watching Shaun White's final competition. It was funny. I got to meet Shaun White at the Olympics in 2016. He was down there. I think he was down there to talk about getting skateboarding into the Olympic Games, or for whatever reason, NBC had him. And when I was down there as an intern, I got a chance to briefly go up to him and I said, "Hey, Shaun, huge fan. Just want to let you know, you're an inspiration to redheads everywhere." And he laughed and he said, "Damn right." So that was my cool moment with Shaun White. So watching him, for all these years in the Olympics, and obviously watching his final competition the other night, and seeing him, get all emotional afterwards was a really cool moment. So that certainly stands out to me. I'm also a huge hockey fan, so I was watching a little U.S. and Canada last night in a really good hockey game. So that's what stood out so far. I won't lie though. With all the conversation this week about the Texans and everything going on with the Super Bowl, the Olympics have kind of taken a back seat to some of the things that we have going on here in the country.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of like been kind of weird having the Olympics like on NBC coverage and then having the Super Bowl on NBC. But I also saw that you've been part of the Ultimate Hoops in New York. So you definitely know your basketball. So what are your thoughts on the James Harden trade that sent Ben Simmons, Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, 2 first-round picks to the Nets in exchange for Harden and Millsap?
Man, where do we start? I mean, from the Harden standpoint, it's just like, of course, of course, James Harden couldn't make it work with other superstars, and here we go again. But from a Nets standpoint, I think they made the best of a situation that was not going to work. We've seen here in Houston what happens when James Harden is not interested, when he doesn't feel like playing for you anymore. I was just waiting for the fat suit to make an appearance in Brooklyn, Manav. But yeah, I mean, I think the Nets needed to move on because you couldn't just keep Harden and hope that things magically get better. We've seen what happens when he's disinterested and checked out, and it was getting ugly there. So to turn him into Ben Simmons, who I think is not a great player like Harden is, but I think is a good fit next to KD, and Kyrie Irving is the number 3 that could play really good defense and just distribute. I think it's a good situation for Simmons. And, getting Seth Curry back, who's a really good shooter, I think increases the Nets' depth that they certainly need, for sure, when they get Joe Harris back as well. The key for them is going to be Durant's health, and if Kyrie Irving becomes a full-time player, if New York City drops the vaccine mandate. If that happens, I think the Nets have a really good chance of still being, a team that's playing in June in the NBA Finals. And from a Sixers standpoint, look, we know Daryl Morey loves himself some James Harden, right? Rockets fans. So getting Harden back in the fold, you were never going to get anything for Ben Simmons. He was never going to help you this year. You got a healthy Embiid playing at an MVP level. You had to do something to go for it, to try and win that championship. The East appears to be wide open. So from a Sixers standpoint, I know people are worried about, well, what's Harden going to be a couple of years from now when he signs that extension and he's making all this money as his career starts to wind down. But you can't worry about that right now. You got to be in the now, in the moment. And I respect that Daryl was able to, turn Ben Simmons into Harden when so many people for months were saying, what are you doing? This guy is, a diminished asset. You should have traded him a while ago. And Daryl basically, withstood the onslaught of the haters coming for him and turned him into James Harden. So I think the Sixers and Nets both benefit from what is a just bizarre, only the NBA type of situation.
Yeah, definitely. It was a blockbuster trade. And I think it's a fair trade. You mentioned that. I think the Nets, they get a lot more defense. Ben Simmons, one of the best defenders in the NBA. And you also have Andre Drummond. And then you have Seth Curry for shooting. Obviously, that adds more depth, and you're losing Harden as a shooter. So getting Seth Curry back, I think, is good for them. And really for the Sixers, I think Embiid and Harden in the pick and roll is something that I'm looking forward to seeing, because I think that's going to be very, very insane to watch, something that gives the Sixers a really big advantage. But I'm just not sure if Harden's ever going to be, happy. Next year, who knows? Maybe he wants to leave Philly. I mean, I just don't know if he wants to be, consistent in a team. And I just really don't get why he would want to leave a team like the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just James Harden, man. Now, I will say, playing with Kyrie Irving could be tough on anyone. It's just amazing that Kevin Durant continues to hitch his wagons to that guy and has no issues with everything that's gone on over there. But I mean, Harden's got the history. He's not going to get the benefit of the doubt. We're talking about a guy that couldn't play with Chris Paul, couldn't play with Dwight Howard, couldn't play with Russell Westbrook. I mean, you can't play with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. The Irving thing I get, but KD, come on, James.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Yeah. So my last question for you, Jake, I was looking on your website. You've interviewed some Yankees legends like Mariano Rivera. I think you've spent a lot of time up there in New York City. So, are you somewhat of a Yankees fan, actually?
Yeah, so I grew up in New York. I've been living in Houston for the last 4 years almost. So it's funny. I have a lot of relationships, and I know a lot of people up in the New York sports scene. But I've been doing radio here in Houston for 4 years, and let me tell you, it's way more fun to talk about the Houston teams when they're good than when they're not good. Like I would much prefer the Rockets and the Texans to get on the level that the Astros have been, competing for championships 3 of the last 5 years in the World Series, because it's more fun to talk about teams that are good than teams that are tanking or teams that are rebuilding, like what we've seen here in Houston.
Yeah, for sure. And, Jake, I really appreciate you taking time out here on Saturday to, talk about the Super Bowl and some other stuff. I really appreciate the time.
Manal, I appreciate you having me, man. Continued success. And, maybe you could give me and Cody and BK some advice on how to get some big name interviews, because you're really good at it. Now we certainly need to step up our game.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Jake. You have a good rest of the day. Enjoy the Super Bowl.
You too, Manal. Thanks for having me, man. Continued success.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.